What's up, my guys? What's up, my girls? Welcome back to the Dani Flo Podcast. I'm your boy, Dani Flo. I'm a 28-year-old Catholic husband and father. This is the podcast where I share my philosophy of life. I don't try to answer the question, what is life? I just share what brings meaning and purpose and value and what makes my life significant. And I hope that in sharing that, potentially, it'll be something that makes your life significant as well. Done episodes on the faith, done episodes on fitness, done episodes on my intellectual hero Fulton Sheen, and just any other topic that I think is fun and want to get philosophical about. I'm joined today by someone that I met on Instagram. We're actually meeting in real time. I think this is going to be a really fun experience because we're united by the faith. Her name is Amy. She has a podcast herself, which I think is super hella cool. And we're going to get to know each other in real time, and we are going to talk about some sensitive subjects, which I think is also interesting because she's such a young person and she wants to talk about these things. In my experience, this isn't everyone else's experience, but young people, generally speaking, don't want to talk about controversial or sensitive subjects. But I think that Amy has a very unique experience that on the macro level, probably a lot of people have, but that not everyone is exposed to. So she's going to expose us a little bit to that. And I'm very excited. Amy, thank you for being here with us. And why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. So again, my name is Amy. I am the host of the Inconvenient Truth with Amy podcast. I talk all things Catholic faith, just life and relationships, and then I also throw in controversial topics because I like talking about it. I'm also a college student. I'm studying web development, and I'm also a business owner. So wearing a lot of hats.
That's good. That's interesting in and of itself. So what is we started talking a little bit about the faith before we began recording, and you mentioned that 2020 was kind of an eye-opener for you. I want you to describe it in your own words. That's kind of my takeaway from what you said, but and you tied it to the faith. So what about 2020 made you, I think you said you looked into things a little bit more. What was it about 2020 for you that I guess made you in a sense run back to your faith?
Yeah, so I think one thing to note is I never really left my faith. I just wasn't pursuing my faith. So it wasn't, well, I guess when you don't pursue, it kind of gets worse. So I was going to a public college that was the thing that I was going to every single day. And I made friends. I'm a very extrovert person. So I make friends. And, even though these people aren't, okay, and to be quite frank, I'm in California, you go to a public college, nobody there is Catholic, and even if they are Catholic, you have no idea that they are Catholic because they're not saying it. So being surrounded by these people, it impacts you in a way where you constantly are feeling kind of just I don't need to talk about this. And it's not something that they want to talk about. And even though it could be important to me deep down, it's something that I just wasn't talking about. And then we had COVID happen and everybody went back home. And that's kind of when a bunch of world and political things started happening, which now, even though it stinks that we're all at home and we're all divided and, separated, it was so good for my spiritual life because we have all of these crazy political things happening. And, I have all my secular friends posting about it on social media, and I'm thinking to myself, this isn't right. This doesn't make sense. And I'm getting in debates and I'm thinking, okay, I need to know what I'm talking about. And so in itself, it was kind of a thing where I was like, I feel and I know deep down that this is right, but I can't put that into words. So let me research it and actually see if what I think is right is right. And then when I started looking into it, I started doing apologetics. 2020, 2021, I'm doing deep apologetics because I want to understand why I believe, and I want to be able to coherently explain to others why I believe what I do.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I don't want to make it about uh myself, but I'm trying to make a connection with you. And what happened with me back in 2014 is my sister wanted me to be my niece's godparent. And I wasn't a practicing Catholic at the time. And I was nervous, but I was nervous because I felt I was being chosen as the default option. And I didn't know anything about the faith, but I kind of saw that most godparents were chosen as like, oh, well, you're a good guy and you're my friend. You're not necessarily a good Catholic, but will you be my child's godparent, right? Or you're a good woman. You seem like a decent person. Like, will you be my child's godmother? And I kind of felt like that's what was happening. And um I tried to get out of it, but before I tried to get out of it, I wanted to know what I was talking about, like you.
Mhm.
So I started doing some research, and at the same time, I had a coworker that was, now that I know a little bit more, I think he was like a reformed theology, like Calvinist, and he was like trying to kind of convince me to um, be saved and everything. And I was looking into that too. And long story short, I ended up kind of like you studying my way into the faith. Like when I found the answers, I was like, these are good answers and they seem to be true. And instead of getting out of it, I was like, no, I want to do this, but not only do I want to do this, but I want to like be a Catholic. So it's interesting that would you say that it was all of your secular friends, as you put it, when they were posting these things, would you say that you kind of intuited that it was wrong, but you just didn't know how to explain it, and that's why you had to do the research? Or how would you explain that
Yeah,
you
it was. Well, it was that, and then I also knew, like, they'd put things up, and I'd be like, no, that is wrong. Like,
Mhm,
that makes absolutely no sense. Like, what are you talking
mhm,
about? You haven't done the research. And it actually was when I'd start confronting them
mhm,
that they'd be like, oh, they'd be stumbling, and I'd be like, okay, like, let me put before you this logic that I have for why I think you're wrong, and please respond to me why you think you are right. Please use my arguments and let's have a conversation. And they couldn't
mhm,
be able to do that. And I was looking at that and I was like, I don't want to be that. I do not want to
mhm,
be someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. And it's also another thing is like, if we're Catholic and if
mhm,
we truly believe that our faith is the true religion and that God is really God,
mhm,
why aren't we pursuing it more?
mhm,
Like, we should be pursuing him every single day. We should be um, growing deeper in our faith.
mhm,
And it's not good to have watered down faith either.
mhm.
So,
Yeah, I find that interesting too, that they would post something, you would say, I don't think that's quite right. Here's what I think it is. Go ahead and tell me where you think I'm wrong. They weren't able to do that. And then you realized I don't want to be that way about something that somebody else disagrees with me. Like if somebody disagrees with me on the faith or on politics or on whatever controversial topic you want to insert there, I don't want to be able to not respond to the real time conversation and real time argument that they're presenting before me. I kind of want to be able to. That's you don't. Do you think that's rare? Like how many 19-year-old girls do you know that on either side, right? On the Catholic and non-Catholic side, and on the I guess if we want to give a political example, on the conservative and the liberal side, like how many 19-year-old conservative girls and liberal girls want to understand the other side and be able to respond?
so that's actually a really, really good question because I have, I mean, you, one, what I like to say is we're in this period of time where people are hating in the name of love. So we have the liberal movement who they claim to be for love, but in doing so, they only spread hate. They only spread division. I mean, we have I don't know how political you want to get on this podcast, but like during the elections, I mean, I saw plenty of who actually, they said they were Catholic. They're not Catholic. Catholic friends who are saying, if you voted for Donald Trump, you are, they just give a bunch of like name calling. And then they say at the very end, I don't ever want to talk to you. And I look at that and I'm like, what are you actually promoting? You say you promote love and you are saying all of this in the name of love. That is not love. That is not faith. That is not kindness, which is all something that you say you are, and you say Catholic conservatives aren't. And so I think a lot of girls my age say that they want to understand the other side, but only when it's comfortable for them. They don't like it when you come at them and say, hey, this is my opinion and this is why I think you're wrong. Here are my reasons why I think you are wrong. Please respond to me. They don't respond. They respond in a circle that goes around and around and around. They don't take your evidence. They don't take your logic. They just spew a party line that's been drilled into them from the school system, from social media, from celebrities, and they choose that party line because it's comfortable for them.
So what do you think? Yeah, I don't mind getting controversial or political. I mean, in our case right now, I mean, we have the, I guess, benefit or luxury of agreeing, right? But I mean, what would you say to someone more on the liberal Catholic side that says, well, the only reason, Amy, that you consider yourself a conservative Catholic is because that's been drilled into you?
Oh, because it's brainwashed?
Yeah,
because, you're brainwashed.
Right, because like, you know, for example, you were saying, in my experience, when I try to talk to my liberal Catholic friends, I present an argument, and instead of telling me where I'm wrong in my argument, they go in circles, they call me names, and in conclusion, I never want to talk to you again. And you take a look at that and you're like, I think that's been drilled into them by, you know, maybe the school system. What if they replied and they're like, well, you know what, Amy, your conservative Catholic beliefs, that's been drilled into you. And so, you know, like, what do you think about that?
That's a very good question. I would say mainly because I think it would depend on like what specifically they were talking about, because that can always change. I mean, if we're talking about something like abortion, then it's like, well, that shouldn't be just a Catholic and conservative issue. We're talking we're talking science. We bring science into that. We bring, you know, the value of human life. And we have, another thing is, a big thing is consistency. Conservative and Catholic, the Catholic faith, it is very, very consistent. You can throw in any argument, any world view or politics, and you find that Catholic and conservative views, they most all the time, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say every time, but most every time it is consistent and it lines up and it makes sense. One of the biggest things that I had to deal with during this year is people talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, but then saying they were pro-abortion. And I was it came down to, why is the Black man's life more important than the Black baby's life?
Which some of them are baby boys.
Yes. And why are all women important except for the unborn baby girls? It's not consistent. And so it comes down to, if the leftist liberal platform is so wrong about abortion, why would they be right about any of their other things?
Yeah, so it's kind of like an argument from consistency.
Yeah. And I mean, if
Yeah.
you want to talk about the Catholic faith, that, I mean, you can go back historically.
Mhm,
Jesus historically, it is proven that he existed historically because
mhm,
you have a bunch of other world religions who mention him.
mhm,
Muslims, the Buddhists, the Hindus, they all talk about Jesus and they all reference him and refer to him as either a good man,
mhm,
a wise man, or a teacher. And
mhm,
it's, C.S. Lewis said, like, that doesn't work. That's not consistent because they all say he's this good, wise person, but he said he was the son of God. So it's
mhm,
either he's a liar, a lunatic, or he's the son of God.
mhm.
He
Yeah,
can't
that's one of
be,
my favorite C.S. Lewis.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
he
yeah.
can't be a good
Mhm,
man and then lie, a liar.
mhm,
It's not consistent.
mhm. Um, we're going to get more into the um abortion, um, for lack of better, abortion it has to do with babies' lives. So I hate to refer to it as a topic or an issue because it almost seems like irreverent, that we're
Yeah.
literally talking about. Um, but I kind of want to. So one of the things on your podcast that you said that you talk about is, dating and relationships, and I kind of, I kind of do want to talk about before we dive deeper into abortion and this argument from consistency. Um, so from my perspective, like as a practicing Catholic, right, especially as a practicing Catholic who's been exposed to, the life and the work of like Fulton Sheen, um, for me, dating and relationships, right? So from a Catholic perspective, I think that dating, right, is to discern marriage, right? And when you're date
100%.
right, and when you're dating, you know, you shouldn't be having sex, right?
Yes.
Because
Absolutely not.
right, because sex is one of the things that comes with marriage. As Fulton Sheen says, I have a picture of him right here. As Fulton Sheen says, like sex is included in monogamous marriage, but love, neither love nor monogamous marriage is included in sex, right? So that would be the difference there. So if you and one of your secular girlfriends or one of your liberal Catholic girlfriends were talking about dating and the purpose of dating and relationships, and they said, well, you know what, Amy, the only reason that you think that you shouldn't be having casual sex during dating is because that's been drilled into you, and it might have been drilled into me that casual sex is okay when I'm dating, and neither you nor I are wrong, and so we shouldn't be talking about this. Like, we should just like not be judging each other. And if you don't want to have sex while you're dating, that's fine. But like, don't tell me and don't tell others that they can't and that they shouldn't be having casual sex when they're dating. What would you,
Mhm.
where would you kind of, if they were open to having that conversation and that was their argument to you, like that you were drilled one thing, I was drilled nothing, let's just disagree and let live, like what would your
Mhm.
response be to that?
Well, I mean, if they said they want to like just disagree, then it's like fine. I'm what I'm going to say. I'm not going to change, but this is
Mm,
what I'm going to say. You choose what you're going to do with that information.
mhm,
Um, if somebody came to me and they were like, "Hey, I want to have," I mean, there are two types of people in the world, or two types of
mhm,
girls, I guess you could say, is they're the people who want real relationships that are gonna actually be long term and eventually be marriage, or there are girls who just want to hook up. And it's like,
mhm,
okay, what do you want?
mhm,
I think the girls who go the route of hookup culture, they
mhm,
end up being incredibly sad and they can't keep a man, and they treat themselves like meat. They treat themselves like objects and they allow men to treat themselves as objects. And
mhm,
I think that it is absolutely insane for this movement to be pro hookup because it is objectifying women and it is not truly valuing themselves as
mhm,
something worth more, something that men have to pursue, something that
mhm,
men need to fight for.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, in regards to me believing that, dating is to be, is with the intention of marriage. Yeah, that has been drilled into my head, but it also works. Statistically, it works. I'm pretty sure that I'll have to find the study for you, but studies have been done that prove that conservative, more traditional relationships are way more happier than just the average secular relationship.
I mean, yeah, I think that's a good response. If I wanted to kind of play the secular and liberal Catholic, yeah, I like your response that you said, well, yeah, if they just want to disagree, then yeah, we can walk away, but I'm not going to change my mind, just like they're not going to change their mind. And then for someone else who I guess wanted to engage, I think that's a really good response. But I mean, like I said, if I wanted to play the liberal Catholic girlfriend or the secular girlfriend who probably is liberal but not Catholic, and they said, well, yeah, maybe we are treating ourselves like meat, maybe we are objectifying ourselves, but Amy, men are going to do that anyways, right? So if we sort of beat them to the punch, we are kind of liberating ourselves and not being the victim of them doing it to us. We're taking power and we're doing it to ourselves. What would you say to that?
One word: standards. We need to have standards. We have a bunch of women saying there are no good men out there, and I'm like, it's because we're not holding them to a higher standard. I have a certain set of standards that I have for my future husband, and they relate to religion, they relate to loyalty, they relate to how my future children are going to be raised. Are they going to be good children? And I'm not willing to compromise on any of these because these are very important qualities that make a good man. I'm going to hold my standards high. If men are unwilling and too weak to rise to meet them, I would rather stand alone. I do not fear the idea of being lonely. If to not be lonely, I have to lower myself because a man is too weak to step up to the plate. I think that. Oh, go ahead.
No. I mean, I think these are all good answers, but I'm trying to think of objections that somebody hearing this stuff would
come up with.
Would come up with, and I think what they would say is that the first thing that comes to mind is like, well, Amy, you're just being idealistic because you're young, and eventually you're going to get tired lonely. That's not.
Well, I'm gonna put a little stop right there and say that being with the wrong person is one of the loneliest things you could ever do to yourself.
That's a good point.
Women are so used to settling for less because they are lonely. They do not understand that once they understand their worth and their value, then they start attracting people who see the same in them. It is when you treat yourself like an object and treat yourself with like a piece of meat that you attract wolves.
As you were saying that, and I think you're right, but as you were saying that, I was, like I said, trying to think of objections. The other thing that I could kind of think of is they might say, well, Amy, you were talking about how men shouldn't treat women like pieces of meat because it objectifies them. Like a woman is a person, right? And Fulton Sheen's, one of Fulton Sheen's pithiest quotes is, we must remember to love people and use things, right? We shouldn't use people, we should love people, right? So you were talking about how treating women like a piece of meat objectifies them. Well, you have all these standards for men, you're just objectifying them. you want them to meet certain standards, and you want them to rise to the occasion as if they were some robot, and that's not how it works. You're not treating them like a person when you put all these rules that they, or these check boxes. You're putting these check boxes that they have to check, and if they're not good enough for you, you're just gonna throw them away like you're accusing men of doing to us. So you're a hypocrite,
Well,
Amy.
okay, there's a difference between physical pleasure and
Mm,
character.
okay.
There's a
Elaborate.
very big difference. So I want my husband to be Catholic. I want him to pursue God.
Mm-hmm.
I want him to be conservative because I want him to have morals. I
Mm-hmm.
want him to be loyal. I
Mm-hmm.
want him to understand that when he marries me, he is going to be walking with me on a journey through life. We are going to be facing battles, moral battles. He is going to be the keeper of my, and he is going to be the keeper of our children's souls.
Mm-hmm.
That has nothing to do with what he looks like, and that
Mm-hmm.
has nothing to do with how he makes me feel.
Mm-hmm.
These are
Physically.
things physically.
Right.
These are all things that you want to find in a good person. I don't think anybody can disagree with the fact that they want to be with a good person.
Mm-hmm.
It is, I mean, it is very, I don't think I've ever heard a girl say like, I'm gonna find a bad person who's gonna treat me like crap.
Mm-hmm. I'm probably sounding like what is it called? I probably sound like I'm on repeat, like when you put a song on repeat, because I keep saying I think that's a great answer, and I said that I thought of two objections. Well, I lost the other one, but um, I just thought of something else, and in explaining that I lost the other one, I think I'm losing it. But that's a good that's a good point, that you don't know anyone that, or very few people that would say, I want to be with a bad person. So a while ago, I'm gonna be honest with you, because we like honesty here on my podcast. Obviously yours is called The Inconvenient Truth with Amy, so figured you're a fan of honesty as well. um a while ago, like maybe a month and a half ago, I called my friend and I gave him some unsolicited dating advice,
I
right?
do that all the time.
Right. um, but one of the things that I thought of this because you said that you don't know a lot of women, even if you don't agree with each other on X amount of things, that you don't know a lot of women that say, I want to be with a bad person, or I want to be with a jerk, like that's what I
Mhm.
want. Um, and what I said to him was like, have you ever wondered why jerks end up with like what seem to be nice girls? And he says, yeah, I have wondered that. And I've thought a lot about this. And I think the only difference between like a jerk that ends up with a nice girl or a good girl, and like maybe a guy that's a nice guy or a good guy and ends up lonely, it says, well, the jerk usually shoots his shot, right? Like for some reason, jerks ask girls out. And honestly, we don't know how many girls they've asked out. Like maybe they asked out 100 nice girls, and one unfortunately said yes. Maybe it was 150. Maybe it was 200. Whatever. But good guys, they don't shoot their shot. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
that's what that you know what I mean, because they're scared of being rejected.
they're very
Whereas
scared of being rejected.
whereas a jerk or a bad guy, these adjectives that we throw around, it almost seems like they're comfortable with being rejected.
Well,
And
they just move on to the next woman.
yes, I think that's a great point. And so for me, my unsolicited advice was like, you can't be scared, not shared. You can't be scared of shooting your shot. Like if you have good intentions, right? Like there's two options. If somebody asks out Amy, you're going to say yes or no, right? And
Hmm.
just because you say yes doesn't mean there's going to be a second date, right?
Yeah,
A second
exactly.
date, a second date is going to be yes or no. So like what do you think about that? Like do you think
Yeah. I think it's, I mean, like I said before, I mean, you could get me started on the problems of society. We could be talking all night.
Well, just since your
Yeah,
podcast is about dating and relationships, I
yeah,
wanted to
exactly.
bounce this off of you.
hmm I think that women, not all women, but a lot of women have that motherly instinct in them. Just biologically, we like taking care of people. There's a reason that when you walk into a room, a woman will usually look at the baby and the man will usually look at the car. So
Makes sense.
women, when they see maybe a bad guy or somebody who's, a lot, I mean, I've met some pretty jerky men, and they usually have some sob story that they tell you, and that usually will hook a nice girl, and she'll be like, oh my goodness, like I'm gonna fix this guy, like I'm gonna be there for him. And so that's usually why a nice girl will end up with a jerk. It's that motherly instinct. She wants to take, I mean, like, I don't know if you've heard this, but my sister's a nurse, and she said that nurses always end up with jerks, losers who have no job. And it's because nurses are caregivers. They care for men. And so when they have a boyfriend who's like needs caring for, they immediately are drawn to that.
That's very interesting. That's kind of like an insight into, of course, not all nurses, but like the nurse psyche, if you will. But continue. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, so there's that. And there's also the fear of being alone. That drive a lot of women, and women like attention. Men like attention. We like attention. Everybody likes attention. So when you have, say, a nice girl who maybe is a little bit quiet, she doesn't get asked out much, or she doesn't get that much attention, and suddenly she has this guy who maybe she doesn't know is a jerk, but is a jerk, giving her attention, because, jerks can act like really nice guys. She's flattered. And she gets roped in that way. Nice guys not shooting their shot, it's the fear of being rejected. It's the fear that, or that they're going to come off as a creep. Because that happens a lot of times too, is they're scared that if they're forward, the girl's going to be like, you're weird, like, stop talking to me. And they don't want to deal with that. And pretty much, I mean, I tell guys all the time, like, don't fear rejection. Sure, it's gonna sting for a little bit, but if you're actually a good guy and you have good intentions, if she doesn't see that, then that's her problem. And like that. Another thing is, like, I mean, college guys who are good guys, there's a very small chance that you will find a good girl on a college campus. There's a very low chance you'll find a good girl in a college bar. There's a very low chance that you will find a girl, at a strip club. You got to be looking in places where there are good women. And then when you find good women who are able to see good men, then that's where you start becoming a lot more comfortable.
Where you're not scared of A, coming off as a creep, or B, being rejected, right? Man, I'm really like digging this. So, okay, so do you think that this trait, let's call it a trait, just to keep the conversation going, this trait of like women that have this motherly like instinct, and that maybe they find a jerk that has a sob story, right? And that they kind of want to care for. Do you think that goes away with like age? Like you're 19. If you had this trait or this issue, do you think eventually with time that would go away? Or do you think that that's something that you intentionally have to correct? Like, I can't like get myself tied into wanting to fix this guy because it's bad for me.
I mean, it's always there for some women. I mean, it's always there. Like, our motherly instinct doesn't leave. But I think that girls who are unaware of it can be a little more susceptible. And then I think once they realize, you know, if say there's a nurse who used the motherly instinct and she got with a loser and then realized she was with a loser and was able to pinpoint why she stayed, you know, she'd learn from that. So yeah, I do think that maybe with either, if you have the knowledge of it, then you can never be in that situation. But if you put yourself in situations, I think you can over time learn that, like, hey, I deserve way more.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Driven by the instinct. I think that's another thing, is you can't be driven by that instinct.
Okay, you kind of have to like you have to acknowledge it's there, right?
Yeah.
But I can't let it be the ultimate deciding factor.
Well, that's where standards come in. That's why I really emphasize I'm going to emphasize for my listeners in an upcoming episode why it is so important to have those standards, and why it is so important to really embrace the season of life that God has put you in. So I have so many young people coming to me and being like, how do I get in the dating stage? How do I enter this stage? And I'm like, you're 14. You do not need to be dating.
Yeah, that's right.
My entire life to find some guy who I will marry with for the rest of my life. I don't need to settle for less because I'm scared like the clock is ticking. Because it's, I mean, yes, it is ticking. Sorry, but I'm 19. Like,
right.
Well,
why do you think? Do you think that because you mentioned the ticking, the time ticking? Why does it seem that, would you say that dating and relationships are like the most important thing to young people?
Yeah, I think that society what's really interesting is society has told women that they need to be independent, they need to have their own jobs and et cetera, but then they measure a woman's worth by how many guys are chasing after her. So a woman is, feeling less than.
Do you think they measure women by how many guys they are chasing after, or how many guys they're attracting?
They're attracting, sorry. Yeah, they're attracting.
Because it's interesting that you said that, because my wife and I were having this conversation, because it does seem, because social media is just an extension of our world, right? We upload to social media what we collectively value, right? And a lot, if a girl posts a picture that's provocative and it gets 1 million likes, and this other girl doesn't post a picture that's provocative, it's just a normal picture, and it doesn't get the likes, we value the girl that's like, whoa, she's got 1 million likes. Or I mean, a lot of times it's like for like, right? Like, so a lot of times it's two girls, both provocative pictures, and the one with the most likes wins. But like you said, at the same time, they're expected to be independent and not rely on how many men they're attracting, not rely on even having a relationship of any sorts. Like, don't place any value on casual sex if you're having casual sex. Don't place any value on cohabitation if you're cohabitating. Don't place any value on being engaged if you're engaged. Don't even, those things aren't important as being independent. But at the same time, attract as many guys as you can. And if you can't do that, then
you're not that special. Women are being told that they need to do X, Y, and Z to be a woman, and those things are degrading them. You're supposed to post a bikini photo and get 1 million likes from guys who are thirsting after you, and it's like, that is the most degrading thing that you could do to a woman.
So what do you think? Here's a hypothetical question, right? Let's say they're like, okay, Amy, you're clearly unhappy with what we value, right? Let's say, hypothetically speaking, that we lived in this world where people had morals, people had standards, women didn't upload naked selfies. Men didn't double tap them. What would social media look like in this world? What would social media be for in this world?
I don't think social media would exist actually, because we'd all be living our lives. We'd all be living, and we would not be staring at the lives of others.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't exist.
Right. That's super interesting. So so for example, I actually met my wife on Twitter. I met my wife on Twitter, and then my Twitter got hacked, and I wasn't good at Twitter. I thought I was gonna be one of those guys on Twitter that had the funny one-liners, and everyone was gonna be like, "Oh, you're so funny," and that didn't work out, and that kind of like disincentivized me to keep tweeting. And so once I met my wife and we started dating, and my Twitter got hacked, I just deleted it. I was like, oh, so I guess in this world where there isn't social media, right? And because I guess that's interesting. Why was social media and why was the internet invented?
That is a very good question.
You know what I
It
mean?
was, it's been hijacked. I think nowadays, it started out with good intentions. Now it's just a platform for comparison. It is a platform for censorship. There's a lot of censorship going on, and it is for indoctrination. I think also that in some ways people can definitely use it for good. You and I are both trying to use Instagram for good. We are trying to promote good values. We were trying to promote Catholic values. But I think to some extent, I mean, I've come to the conclusion that when I get married and when I start my family, I'm not going to be posting about them. I want to live my life. I want to raise my children without strangers' eyes on me. Same
I
with
think that's
when I
a
get in
very
a
noble.
relationship.
That's
Like,
I mean, yeah,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Yeah, well, I think we're both getting like super pumped. So, no, yeah, I want you to continue. Sorry.
Oh, I mean, just same with when I get in a relationship. Okay, so like my audience for my podcast is 82% women. A lot of those women are single women. I get in a relationship, I do not want to suddenly throw my relationship in front of all of my listeners. I want to keep that private. It is something that I am pursuing, and my boyfriend will be pursuing it, and will want to keep that sacred. Maybe I'll have him on for an interview. I'm not like trying to create this into content. This is my life. I want to live my life. And I think it's really important that people remember your followers. You do not owe your followers anything. They get to know what you want them to know. If you have an opinion about something, you are more than welcome to just keep it to yourself. They don't need to know. You don't owe them anything.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting, like you said, like we don't know why the internet was invented or originated, but much like everything, because I mean, you and I believe, from our Catholic principles that we live in a broken world because of the fall from grace, right? And so sometimes things are created with good intentions for a good purpose, right? And then they get hijacked, right? And one of the things that you said, internet has been hijacked and social media has been hijacked is for comparison. It's for indoctrination. You mentioned another one that was a good one. Obviously, one of the biggest things that it's for is for commerce, right? For like buying and selling. But yeah, I find that really interesting that you think that if we lived in a morally superior world than the one that we live in now, social media probably wouldn't exist because people would be just living their lives. And I guess like in that world, I probably wouldn't have met my wife. You would probably your dating pool would be just your area where you live, right? Because it's the social media and the internet that allows us to connect with people across cities and towns.
I mean, yeah, it can be used for so many good things. It can be used. I think it really comes down to how each individual person is using them and how people need to be aware of how social media is affecting them too. So I mean, like I'm from a huge family. 4 of my older siblings met their spouses online. So it can definitely be used for amazing things. Like if you look at inventions in America, we've made so much progress. Like we've created things that have were probably not conceivable, 100 years ago. So that's what's so great. But then it's like, what happens when it gets hijacked?
Yeah. I mean, what happens when it gets hijacked? That's the question. I mean, a lot of us in the Catholic world think that our faith has been hijacked, right? A lot of us that are interested in culture, in American culture, in politics, in what it means to be a conservative. Like, to me, I've done episodes on this. To me, like, being a conservative means like you conserve God, right? Your right to worship God. You conserve like your right to raise your family how you want. Like, I don't want a government body telling me how I can raise my kids. It's conserving your right to work and provide for yourself and for your family. It's like conserving
morals. It is conserving the ideas and principles that create good and moral people.
And a lot of people think conservatism has been hijacked. It's no longer about morals. It's about letting Dani has to let Amy live how she wants without interfering whatsoever. And Amy has to do the same for Dani, and the government has to do the same for us. Like, that's what it seems to be about now. Like, it's not about what's moral and what's not. It's about being able to live your life without anybody interfering with it whatsoever. Not government, not your friends, not your family, not your coworkers, not anybody should be interfering with the way that you're living. That's what conservatism seems to be about.
Yeah, I really like that you brought that up. I really like that you brought that up, because I was literally thinking the same thing the other day, that conservatism without morals is just as bad as leftism and liberalism. Because if you go along that headspace that I can let Dani do whatever he wants, I'm not going to interfere, the government's not going to interfere, then abortion is okay. In that world, abortion is okay because you're saying a woman can do whatever she wants and the government's not going to interfere.
The government nor men.
Yeah.
Because it's none of their business. But now that we're here, of course, some people are going to have a problem that I'm a man and that I'm having this conversation, because biologically speaking, I can't get pregnant. I can't have that experience. And so they'll say, this is something that only women should have the privilege to talk about. So you're here, but then at the same time, someone is going to say, well, Amy, you haven't been pregnant yet. So if you did get pregnant and it was unexpected, all of a sudden that would throw a wrench in your plans. You wouldn't be able to finish college. You wouldn't get to pursue the career that you want. Maybe the father of the baby doesn't want to stick around. Maybe you don't have the money. Maybe you just don't want the baby. Maybe it's causing you health complications. You talk about having standards for a man. Well, what if you meet the love of your life, but one of his standards is he doesn't want a woman that already has children? You haven't experienced, you may biologically be able to have a child, but you haven't been pregnant yet. And so that also disqualifies you. But what people don't know, and what I find interesting about you, is that you were born during the one child policy. So I feel like I just threw spaghetti at the wall. So take whatever you retained and go ahead and take your time and explain to us what was that like to be born at a time where you can only have one child, and how that's impacted you.
Okay. Before I dive in, I just want to touch on your mention that people are going to come at you and saying that you have no place during this topic. To the people who think that way, I want to say this. It is the lack of men standing up for this, which is why abortion is being so normalized. Men are being told that they have no say in this topic, but they do. They're 50% of that child. If men stood up and said, hey, no, you know what? I am going to take care of you. I am going to provide. I'm going to stand by you because this is a child. This is a life. And I respect you enough to not make you go through an abortion that I'm going to put aside my plans and put you and this child before me. It is because men are being told to be silent that this is such a problem. I mean, there's the saying that, oh man, it's like it flew out my brain. But pretty much to the extent it's bad things happen when good men fail to stand up. So we need more men to stand up.
Let's keep talking about this before you, like you said, before you dive in. So are you saying, Amy, that the reason that abortion is to such a large extent, or why it's widely expected, is because when a man gets a woman pregnant, he's not saying, you know what, I'm going to take care of you and that baby, and we don't have to think about abortion because we don't need it. Like, I had plans, but this happened now, and I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of the baby. And if more men did that, then abortion numbers would go down? Or are you saying that's just one part of the problem?
I'm saying I'm not going to say that, like, I mean, it could. I don't have a way to divide how many abortions happen because the boyfriend said he wasn't going to step up to the plate. I think it contributes, but I also think that it's just, in general, we need good men to stand up for what's right. Abortion is wrong, so we need good men to counter it. We need good men to stand up and say, this is wrong. I'm going to do the right thing and do whatever it takes to make sure that I do not have to murder. I'm not responsible for the death of my child. We have a bunch of weak men who are running away, and that is, I mean, it's resulting in abortion, and it is resulting in a weak society.
Do you think it's also, I mean, and this is, like you said, like, we don't have a way to, definitely, like, on our own time, we could, like, look it up and try to come up with that information. But do you think that's also, like, obviously everyone has a limited perspective, but I've had the opinion for a long time that there's really not a lot of marriages, number one, and there's also really not that, like, the desire to want to get married, I feel like, is, like, at an all-time low as well. Like, people don't even, like, people think it's just unnecessary, or
well, it's because of hookup culture. People are getting all the benefits of marriage without having to make that promise.
And do you think that's also because men are like, well, if a girl,
we have commitment issues, our society has commitment issues,
right? But like you were saying, I think that part of the reason that abortion is, I guess, so widely accepted and legalized is because men feel like they can't be part of the conversation and are not standing up, and that's being weak of them. Do you also think that it's like, well, if girls just want to hook up, I'm not going to force them to get married? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see that. I think that men, like, it's one thing if somebody else wants to do it, but you don't have to do it.
That's true.
Yep. Like, a girl can come up to a guy and be like, hey, let's, take a little tumble in the sheets, and he can say no. You have that choice. You can say no. Men can get morals.
So, but do you think that them saying no is seen as a sign of weakness, and they don't want to be seen as weak?
Saying that,
like you said, like, if a girl went up to a guy and wanted to tumble in the sheets, that was really funny. But I don't know why that was really funny. But and he said no, like to you and me, like that's a sign of strength, right? Like he has self-mastery, like he has self-control, and he knows, I can't do this unless you're my wife, and you're not my wife, therefore I can't do this. And that's seen as a sign. But to the culture, like it's seen as, what, like you gave up that opportunity, like there's something wrong with you. And they don't want that. They care too much about what would be said if they said no.
Well, then I'd say that's weak of him to care so much about what a culture thinks that he's willing to disrespect somebody and himself. I had a friend recently reach out, and it's actually a very secular friend, if I'm 100% honest. And he was telling me like, hey, I'm hanging out one-on-one with this girl who's in a relationship. What are your thoughts on that? And I told him, you're a jerk. You are disrespecting yourself. You're disrespecting her boyfriend, the relationship. Take a step back, man up and do that. And he, you know, he gives me all these excuses like, but we're such good friends. And I'm like, no, like and I don't know, he was, last I talked to him, he was gonna kind of tell that to her. But I told him, if a girl sees you telling her that you don't want to disrespect her as weakness, that's her problem.
Yeah, it's kind of like what you were saying earlier, you know, like don't be scared of rejection, because if a girl can't see that you have good intentions, like that's her problem. In this situation, it's the same thing. Like if a girl is in a relationship and you want to respect her relationship and you don't want to spend one-on-one time with her because things can happen, right? Then she should be able to see like, hey, this is a good guy. He respects that I'm in a relationship, and that, you know, this relationship might lead to something serious like engagement and marriage, and he doesn't want, I mean, that would just be so confusing.
Yeah,
right?
and then I was telling him, I was like, if she, you know, it's you saying like, I respect you enough to do this, and then it's gonna make her think about, okay, like what are my intentions? And it's like, if I mean, I don't even know this girl. I'm just hearing this from a third party, but I'm like, if she's putting herself in this situation where she's hanging out one-on-one with other dudes and she's not telling her boyfriend, why is she even in a relationship? What are her intentions? And lastly, I mean, I was telling him, like, if she ends up getting single, do you even want to get in a relationship with her? Because she obviously doesn't care enough about her boyfriend's opinion. And she doesn't frankly, pardon the French, give a damn about the relationship, that she's willing to jeopardize it. So it's like, is this somebody that you even want in your life?
Yeah, I mean, those are good insights. So let's, if you're satisfied with the insights that you've given us on, you know, dating and relationship and a man's place in, you know, talking about abortion and giving his opinion about abortion, let's get into your story about the one-child policy.
Yeah, so I'm born during China's one-child policy. So for those of you who do not know, that was pretty much the Chinese Communist government telling couples that they were only allowed to have one child because of population control. And it is custom in China for baby boys, boys to take care of their families when the parents grow old. So what resulted is everybody wanted their one child to be a boy. And so that meant that all of the baby girls were aborted or, you know, left at doorsteps or in the marketplace. And so I was definitely one of the more fortunate children to be left at the doorstep of an orphanage. And I don't know my story. Like that's pretty much all I know. I know that I was dropped at the orphanage, and I know that I was adopted. And I had a girl reach out to me, and she was like, oh my goodness, like, I'm so glad you shared it, because I shared it on my podcast. If you guys would like to listen more, you can go and listen to that. But
The Inconvenient Truth with Amy.
Yes.
She has part of the reason that I reached out to Amy is because her description like resonates with someone like me. So if it resonates with someone like you, then the Inconvenient Truth with Amy listen to it. It's on my to-do list. So honest and open conversations for independent thinkers, life, controversial topics, and Catholic faith. And as she's articulating right now, she's talked about the one-child policy on her podcast. So continue, Amy.
Yeah. So, fun fact, one of the reasons I named my podcast what it was. Well, I named it, and then I realized I was my birth mother's Inconvenient Truth.
Mm-hmm. Because you weren't a boy, and so...
Well, many things.
Right.
I don't know. Like, I could have been her second child. Maybe she was a teen. Maybe I came out and she was like, "Oh, this is not a boy." But either way, I mean, thousands of babies have been just left on the streets to die. I mean, they have found many children's bodies in trash cans over there. So she's valued my life enough to, I don't know what situation she was, but she valued it enough to carry me to term, give birth, and then see, okay, like, let's leave her for adoption.
God bless Amy's mom. Wherever you are, biological mom. Okay, is there anything else that you kind of want to say about that? Because I have a question.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so like you said, you feel fortunate that you were dropped off at an orphanage, and a lot of babies, a lot of babies are left in trash cans.
Well, they just leave them on the streets.
Or on the streets. I guess, what would you say to if I didn't agree with you, right? And I'm trying to get into the psyche of a person that doesn't agree with you, and I said, we'll see, Amy. That's what happens when abortion and healthcare, reproductive rights for women aren't available. Like, women are forced to have babies, and then babies are just left out in the street to die. So what's the point of forcing women to have babies, go through the trauma of carrying a baby 9 months, just so they are forced to leave them out in the street because they can't take care of them?
Well, in China, there were services. Thousands of women got sterilized. There were forced sterilizations, abortions. There were about 38 million abortions that happened in that period of the one-child policy. So,
my goodness,
there were. It wasn't a lot of them. There were.
I don't even know what to say to that. I can't even imagine. That's okay. So, I guess the only other thing that I can think of is a person would say, well, I guess, Amy, just because that was your experience, that's not everyone's experience, and so we shouldn't be making policy, and we shouldn't be making laws off of your experience, right? We should do what's best for all women, and every woman should have the right to decide for themselves, because they're the ones carrying the baby, not you, Amy, and not all those women were born in China, I guess.
So all women, does that include all the unborn women? Do all women have that right to life? Because all these unborn baby girls do not have that right. And then that brings us to the philosophical question of what constitutes a human. Why are humans valuable? And to the atheists, humans are apes. And so maybe we don't have value. Maybe it's okay to just murder them. But then it's like, why is the whole Black Lives Matter a thing? If we're just apes, right, why is racism bad? Why is racism bad if we're just apes and we're not important and we have no value?
Yeah, I guess, like, if you wanted to go to the route that that humans just do what's optimal for, I guess, survival or like evolution, maybe racism is part of that, right? If we're not valuable independent of ethnicity and race and things like that, then it would seem that racism is kind of amoral, right? It's neither good nor bad. It's just something that happens, and we can't really control it because we have a monkey's brain,
I
right?
mean, like, if truth is relative, then anything is, if God doesn't exist, then anything's permissible.
Especially this. I mean, what? So I guess if somebody, I mean, I don't know, I'm not fortunate enough to have a lot of conversations like this, right? Because they're controversial and sensitive subjects, probably by nature. I mean, maybe somebody thinks that they're controversial and sensitive because we are trying to control people's lives, and controlling people's lives are bad, and that's why
you know what's interesting is when you talk to a woman who has had an abortion, or when you talk to people abortion, it is very rare. I mean, you get a few nuts who are like, I love abortion, and you're just like, okay, what's going on with you? But most people will immediately go into defense mode, and they will justify why what they did was okay, why they had no other choice. They don't say like, oh yeah, I just wanted to kill my baby because I wanted to kill my baby. They immediately go into, no, I had to do this. Like, it wasn't an easy decision, but I had to do this.
Right. So are you saying they're using language that it seems like almost as if they were forced, right? Like, because like
they're using language where they know that what they're doing is wrong, but they've gotten into a headspace where they feel like it's the only thing that they can do. They've been groomed. They've been indoctrinated that this is okay. This is the answer. Abortion is not. People have said to me like, oh, abortion just gets rid of the child. I'm like, no, abortion doesn't just get rid of the child. It just makes you a parent of a dead child. The moment that child is conceived, you are a parent, you are a mother, and that is life, which, I mean, scientifically, you have a baby who has a heartbeat at 16 days, at 9 weeks, the baby has everything that you and I have. I mean, you're just a father.
Very smaller, yeah.
It's just very small. So it gets to the stage of like, okay, so does undevelopment make you less of a human? Then what about all the teenagers who have not gone through puberty? They're undeveloped.
I'm not sure. I mentioned this in one of my philosophy classes, but I mentioned that I had heard anecdotal, I guess I just had heard things like on podcasts that I listen to, that science is kind of moving in the direction that like the men don't have like a fully formed brain until like 25, like something about their like frontal.
It doesn't fully connect until like 27.
And my philosophy professor was like, yeah, like it is. I consider him a smart guy, and he was like, yeah, that's what it seems to be showing, right? So he kind of like tipped his hat to me. And the reason I bring it up is because like, so are men not fully, if they're not all the way developed by the time, because your brain is part of you, if it's not fully connected to your 25, so what is a man between conception and age 25? Like,
yeah,
like quasi-human, kind of human, almost but not quite. Like you said, puberty, the disabled.
I mean, and then it comes down to heartbeat too. I've talked to a few people about heartbeat, and they say like, oh, I think it's wrong until heartbeat. And then I bring up the question, why is it wrong to desecrate dead bodies? There's no heartbeat, but why would it be seen as disgusting and morally wrong if grave diggers, went to the cemetery and brought out bodies and, played with them and, danced with them and did all types of just nasty things? Why is that wrong? There's no heartbeat, but they're still human. So then it brings
I've never heard this. That's a good.
What is a human? Why is a human valuable? To an atheist, maybe we're not. But then you have to bring in, well, what about, why is it wrong to kill each other?
Yeah.
And then, it comes down to like DNA. I mean, like DNA, that's from the moment of conception. You've got the child has the DNA.
Right, from the moment of conception. I mean, just to kind of build off of what you're saying, I have a 2.5-year-old, and when my wife was pregnant with him, we went to her first checkup. She was 10 weeks pregnant, and they did the ultrasound. And when my wife asked what was on the screen, and the ultrasound technician said, "Well, that's the heartbeat," and I heard everything. I heard everything that was happening, and the ultrasound technician kept doing her thing, making sure that the baby, I guess, looked what it's supposed to look like at 10 weeks. Did different things to where she could see just the foot, just the hands, stuff like that. And then she went back to the screen that my wife had saw, and I saw something like flicker, kind of like this. And then I asked, like, "What is that?" And she said, "Yeah, that's the heartbeat." And I almost started crying. But
It's beautiful.
when my wife asked, it didn't really, like, I guess maybe because I wasn't asking, but when I asked and she answered me, it was kind of like automatic that I almost just started crying. And it's kind of what you're saying, like, what is special about that? If it's okay to stop a baby, like, why is it a controversial issue or a sensitive topic to make a baby's heart stop through just abortion or any method, right? And
I mean, yeah. You for the longest time, and there's still people out there who believe that the unborn are just clumps of cells. And okay, little backstory is I since 8th grade and then through high school, I would go into schools and give pro-life talks. So
amazing. God bless you.
I'm used to a lot of women coming at me with their different stories and various arguments, but there's still the narrative going around that the unborn are just clumps of cells. If the unborn were simply clumps of cells, like cancer, we would not have the pro-life movement. It is, there's a reason that when a woman finds out she's pregnant, she gets excited, she gets the app. You look at Mayo Clinic, you look at pregnancy medical things, apps, and they when your development is, and they say, okay, the baby's as big as like a mustard seed, the baby's as big as a papaya now, the baby's the size of a watermelon now. Like, it comes down to, do you think it's okay for a woman to kill her child for convenience?
Yeah, ultimately that is what it comes down to. And I think, these are my thoughts on what you just said. First of all, I think that's amazing that since 8th grade. So when I was in 8th grade, I was, I think 12, 13. So it sounds like you've been doing this about 7 years, 7
actually,
years.
There's a bad experience and I got kicked out. So I haven't been asked back, but
okay.
Yes.
Well, I think that's a very noble cause. And I think, like, my takeaway from what you're saying is, and honestly, some people probably think, like, man, it's so great that your mom left you at an orphanage. And then we have to ask the question, okay, why is that great? Like, if a baby isn't, like, hella valuable, right? If it doesn't have, like, dignity and value, like, why should my mother be praised that in an environment, in a geopolitical environment, that you were only allowed to have one child because of population, because they didn't want the population to explode, that instead of ending my life, she decided to give birth to me and then give me a chance? Like, why is that noble if I'm no more significant than than any other object. I think that's what your point is, that what is a baby? Is a baby a person? Like, does a baby have a right to life? And does it have value?
Yeah.
Is there, thank you so much for sharing your story about being born in the one-child policy and articulating your pro-life position as well as you can, and trying to come up with like real-time answers to these, hypothetical objections that I'm coming up with, but that in your experience you've kind of heard before. Is that right? That you've
Yeah.
kind of like heard similar, probably not exactly the same, but similar themes, maybe. And
I mean, with the abortion. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, I forgot what I was saying. So you go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, with the abortion community and the people who are pro-abortion, they all say the same things.
Mm-hmm.
It all, goes around in circles, and they, give me complaints, they give me arguments, they, say, well, population, and they say the same things, but it really comes down to, like, I can talk about everything, but it really comes down to, do you think it's okay for a woman to do it for convenience? Because there's no reason why abortion should exist in this society.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I guess this is really personal to you, and like for other people it's controversial and sensitive. I guess I want to end on a personal note, and I guess like just ask you, like, why do you think you're attracted to what are considered controversial topics? Like, why do you think you have that kind of person? Because it's your podcast, and like you said, like, you don't owe Dani a certain topic. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to talk about pineapple on pizza just because that's what I want you to talk about, right? Like, so what is it that made you choose like abortion and other topics considered controversial? What do you think?
Because I think people are horribly uneducated about how things are. We live in a very broken and very sad society, and people are searching. People are really searching for truth. And that's kind of why I want to talk about things. I want to give people who are searching answers.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's great that you said that, because it's kind of like what you were talking about at the beginning, to kind of not intentionally bring it full circle, but you were talking about like a lot of people think that they're doing things from a place of love, but when you interact with them, they're not being kind. They're calling me names, and I consider that stuff not loving, but kind of like hating. It sounds like you want to talk about controversial topics that are considered controversial topics, not to trigger anybody or make some sort of judgment on them, but it's coming from a place of love, that like if you're searching for some answers on these controversial topics, like, I want to be there for you. Does that sound?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, it's to listen to my podcast. I'm not holding a gun to their head and telling them that they need to listen to my podcast. Mm-hmm. If I'm here for people who want answers, I'm here for the searchers of truth, I'm here for those who aren't satisfied with what society is trying to force down their throat. Mm-hmm. I want to be there to give them something more.
Man, well, me as your big brother in the faith, I'm proud of you. And I'm so happy that you came on my podcast. I'm really interested in seeing it grow, and seeing the way that you think grow. I think like with people that disagree with us, to them, when they find someone that agrees with them, like, it's refreshing to them. And it's like, it's the same with us. When we find someone that agrees with us and is like-minded, it's refreshing and it's exciting, and it's just hella cool. And so I'm really excited for you, and God bless you for starting a podcast. And just my last question is, I guess, like I said, I want to end on personal. I guess, what's the next, like, besides, because I let you choose, right? When I contacted you, I said, we can talk whatever you want to talk about, that's what I want to talk about, and you chose this. What if no, I'm not gonna ask that, but what's the next one that you, if this is your first focus, what do you think is your second one that you kind of are, for lack of better terminology, passionate about discussing on your podcast and just with anybody that is willing to hear you out?
Yeah, I mean, dating and relationships is something I'm really passionate about. I'm actually really gotten really passionate about singleness and embracing that time, and like not being so focused on, you know, a relationship and what's to come. And like, even though those relationships are beautiful, it's like, there's a reason the right person's not in your life right now. So use this time to grow in the faith, grow in who you are. And, you know, it's beautiful. So singleness is a big thing. I want to start looking more into contraception and, you know, everything surrounding that. I mean, yeah, it's all.
I like that answer, and I keep saying this is going to be the last question, but then you say something like amazing, and then I gotta like. So you said like the next one would be dating and relationships. One of the things that I forgot earlier was you were talking about like women need to have standards, and even if you have to risk being alone, don't lower your standards, right? Like men have to be men of character, you know, and if they really want to and they're not men of character, they're going to find out, what do I need to do to become a man of character, because I want to be with this. Like they have to fight for you, right? I think is kind of the way that you put it, and I totally agree with that. So on the flip side, what do you think that young ladies have to do, right? Like if your best friend, right, if your bestie was like Amy, like I want to get ready to one day get married, like what do I have to do? What would you tell her?
Pursue God.
Okay.
Pursue God. Be so hidden in the faith and God's word that a man has to pursue God to find you. Because like attracts like. Like you're not going to find a good man at the bar. You're not going to find him in political science class. I mean, maybe you will, but it's very unlikely. You know, you'll probably find him at mass. You'll probably, if you're a Latin mass goer, then that's probably where you'll find him. And then when you meet him, keep the standard high. Don't let things slide. I mean, I've started taking a look into the Catholic tradition of courtship, because I find it really interesting. It's very extreme, but it's very interesting. And I've started realizing that as somebody who is looking for a potential husband, I need to set the standard high. And, you know, if he's going to run away from standards, then let him run away. But I think the main thing for young women is you need to pursue God.
Man, that was the last question, I promise. And thank you so much for that answer. But you did mention the Latin mass, so you'll have to come back on so that we can talk about the Latin mass. And I don't want to like make you emotional, for lack of better words, but you know, your biological mom, she did a good job, and your parents who raised you with I think they did a really good. You're definitely following the fourth commandment, you know, honor thy father and thy mother. So good for you. So yeah, I hope you come back so we can talk about the TLM or whatever other subject that you want to talk about. Tell people that all your socials and how they can connect with you. Believe it or not, on the podcast apps, most of my listeners are women. I don't have the analytics for YouTube, but I publish my podcast through Anchor, and then Anchor distributes it everywhere else, and they give you analytics, and it's about like maybe 55-60% according to those analytics that my audience is women. So maybe some of them are single and they could use someone like you. So tell everyone how they can connect with you.
I am on Instagram at the Inconvenient Truth with Amy. My DMs are always open to people. I'm always willing to chat, whether it be a controversial issue that you want to talk about or just someone to talk to about your dating problems. I will be there for you. I am only on Instagram. I am not jumping on Parler or Twitter. I'm busy. Right?
You're living your life, like you said.
I'm living my life. You can email me too if you want to. I'm at the Inconvenient Truth with Amy at gmail.com. And then my podcast is on Google, Spotify, and Apple. And you just search the Inconvenient Truth with Amy and you'll find it.
All right. At the Inconvenient Truth on Instagram, at the Inconvenient Truth with Amy on Instagram, and then at the Inconvenient Truth with Amy at gmail.com if you want to email her. And she's on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, pretty much I think the top 3. So Amy, thank you so much for your time and keep doing the good work that you're doing.
Thank you for having me.